Okay, let's kick it off. Thank you for everybody for your patience and welcome to this virtual fireside chat with Jason Gardner, the founder and CEO of Marqeta. I'll start by saying, Jason, that I'd love for us to do this in person and maybe over a beer or a good glass of wine. But so maybe next time we'll do that. But for now, we'll settle for this sort of virtual concept. For those who don't know me on the phone, on the line, I'm Rafi Carmeli. I'm a partner at Viola Growth. Viola is the leading Israeli venture and growth firm in Israel, investing across sectors in technology with over 3 billion AUM. And just for sort of the background and connectivity, I gotten to know Jason and the Marqeta team back in 2017 when I was back working for Goldman Sachs and had the opportunity to partner with Jason and his team out of that firm. So thanks again, Jason, for joining. For those that are less familiar with Marqeta, Marqeta has really defined the standard for modern card issuing and developed a leading issuer processor platform powering many of the world's most innovative and fast-growing companies. And for those who don't know Jason, at least I'll introduce you briefly. And I thought to do it by highlighting 3 things that I love about you in escalating order. The fact that you're not just an entrepreneur, but a serial entrepreneur. So that means you're really into it, going after it more than once. The second most important thing is that you grew up in New Jersey, which is where I live, and I love that fact about you. And the most important thing is that you were a GO at Club Med. And, Club Med is one of my favorite vacation spots. And I always wanted to be a GO at Club Med. So I admire you for that as well. A couple of housekeeping items before we kick it off. We have about 40 minutes of Jason's time. I will start with an open discussion and questions to Jason. But for the audience that have joined us, if you can please, through the chat tool that Zoom has, send me questions. I'll just field them to Jason throughout the conversation, and hopefully this will be sort of an open dialogue. So please do that. So the first thing I wanted to raise is really hot from off the press, and it's an open-ended question. You just announced a very impressive capital raise, quoting from sort of public sources, a big check, $150 million, a 2x valuation, what you did last year, crossing the $4 billion mark. And I don't know if you've heard, Jason, but we're in the middle of the most significant crisis in the US in the past few decades. So how, if you can share how all this sort of played out, that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, Rafi, thanks for having me. I started thinking about the Club Med days. I was going to Arizona State, and Club Med's North American headquarters was in Scottsdale, Arizona. So I got to spend a summer in Paradise Island, the Bahamas, which is definitely one of the highlights of my life. Back, I would say, even 5-10 years ago, nobody was investing in fintech. Fintech was, believed to be startups that were going to go battle the Visa and MasterCards of the world, or very large banks. And, in our world, Visa and MasterCard are the rails. Think of us as like a locomotive. Our customers are the trains behind those locomotives. And we run these tracks. Visa and MasterCard have interconnected every merchant on the globe, whether online or offline, that takes cards. And the large banks was thinking that, that's typically how you would go build a card product. And Marqeta is a open platform for building Visa and MasterCard card products, whether they're physical plastic, tokenized for Apple Pay, Google Pay, or Samsung Pay, or virtual. So they can be either server to server or consumer to an interset site where you're basically putting the 16-digit number in there. And so today, that is a global phenomenon, something that we invented, a category called modern card issuing. And we've seen where the TAM today is total addressable markets, $45 trillion. That's heading to $80 trillion in the next 10 years. Certainly one of the largest expansions of card processing ever. And we get a lot of incoming. So last year we raised a round that put us at the $2 billion mark that was led by Code 2. After that, we got a lot of incoming calls. We really had no need to go raise capital. We had a significant amount of cash in the bank. We had a fairly low burn, and we got a lot of calls. We got a call from a firm that we think is, the best, certainly one of the largest asset managers in the world, the gold standard, as we refer to them as. And they called us. We took the call, and happened actually very quickly. Again, we didn't need the money, but it's certainly nice to have that capital. I think it's a testament to the work that Marquetans have done in building the business. It's a testament to our customers, especially in the on-demand delivery space, which has now become essential services, and we are essential infrastructure. So I think the round that we raised certainly reflects that.
Okay, excellent. Thanks for the background. For the younger entrepreneurs that are listening to this conversation, how would you recommend that they should think about fundraising in this sort of current environment?
Well, fundraising is all about storytelling. I mean, it's 90% psychological, and that the psychology of raising money, even during a pandemic, is all about finding the story that is going to, light you up when you're talking about your vision, the things you want to accomplish. That should be able to transcend, any market, any pandemic, great times, bad times, etc. Like having that vision and being laser focused on it, and the things you got to accomplish is really important. You have to tell that story with a focus that people will really hold on to and want to take that ride with you. For Marqeta, for instance, we went from being predominantly in office to working at home within 3 days. Now we're 3.5 months in. I'm actually really enjoying working at home, and I spent a lot of this time actually working on strategy. And we're introducing Marqeta's sort of next 3 to 5 year strategy to the company next month. So this is a time during the pandemic. Many of us are shelter in place. I know things are beginning to get lifted here or there in Israel. Here in the U.S., it's not. Take the time to really hone the story. Take the time to feel what it's like to be an entrepreneur again. Your company feels very small when you're working at home all the time versus going into an office. So be very focused on that. And obviously recognize how much money you have in the bank, what your runway is going to be. Great deals are still getting done. We're a testament to that. So if you have a great company, you have a great story, you're growing, and it's time to go talk to funds and raise money. There's still a ton of cash on the sidelines.
Okay, and if I think about sort of the balance of fear and greed that both investors but also entrepreneurs constantly think about when it comes to fundraising. How should one think about that? And more precisely, what about the terms? How important are now, the terms, valuation, amount, identity of the investor, style of the fund that you want to partner with versus just, bringing in cash and sort of strengthening the balance sheet, in your view?
Yeah, it's definitely a balance. I mean, we in the beginning, our Series A was co-led by Greylock Israel, which is now 83 North, and Granite Ventures. One of our seed stage funds was Lionbird, which is also out of Israel, based in Tel Aviv. So it was 83 North. In the beginning, it's good to have great investors. It definitely helps you. But we went through some really tough times. Our Series B was a great outcome for us. Our Series C, this was written up pretty extensively in the Forbes article that came out last year. We almost ran out of money, and there's this feeling that you need to always be raising from great investors. You don't always have that option. Your option as an entrepreneur, as the CEO of the company, is to keep the business going. There are a lot of great investors out there that maybe don't have the brand name, but they have money. Some of them are operational. Some of them are diamonds in the rough in regards to the success that they've had. you should be seeking those folks out. So when the sort of the fear and greed, sometimes greed is good, and especially in the context of if your company is doing really well, always raise more money than you need. You will be surprised when you're coming down to 18 months past when you last raised. Having that extra money gives you a lot of leverage, and I think in any negotiation, leverage is really good. And you can find leverage in different ways. You can find leverage in creating the feeding frenzy around multiple firms being involved or multiple investors wanting to invest in your company. Fear is also a good motivator. As an entrepreneur, your fear is failure. And in the beginning, a lot of times getting from A to B is, you got to go from, Milwaukee to Phoenix, and then to, Denver and maybe back to Florida just to get to New York. So it's all over the place. What you tend to do is you make a lot of mistakes in the beginning. Over time, you make a lot less mistakes until you're so laser focused on what you need to do. It's very straightforward in regards to going from A to B and B to C and C to D. So I would, if you can raise money, take all you can, be greedy in that. And then fear is a good motivator. We don't know what this is going to look like. We all believe this is going to be a V recovery. We don't know so much here in the US. So having more capital in the bank is smart. And if you haven't started fundraising and you have, say, a year of runway left, start taking some meetings and just telling people the story. You don't need a deck. Just get people excited about what you're doing. You'll never know what will come out with that.
Okay, great. So there's a bunch of other than fundraising topics that I'd love to dive into: strategy, leadership, how to think about your product, your people, etc. But just to set the stage for that discussion, I want to share with you and the broader audience our perspective as a firm, what we observed in the past 3 or 4 months as this crisis unfolded across our portfolio and the broader ecosystem. So I'll share a couple of slides, and that will take a minute, and then that will set the stage for the discussion. Okay, here we go. Great. Can you see that? Okay, yes. Great. Excellent. So we basically, in very short, saw 2 phases so far as a reaction plan that startups took, and it was pretty much across the board. Phase 1 was much more shock absorbance, crisis management, and then cost optimization, depending on the situation of the company. Now, for the most part, still maybe not all companies, but for the most part, that's behind, or it's sort of at the last phases of dealing with sort of crisis management. And most companies have shifted to phase 2, which is long-term planning. Long-term planning, in our mind, and what we've observed, is really 2 things. It's thinking about strategy and what strategic adjustments a company needs to do to address the risks and opportunities that the situation is in front of them. And you started to talk about the strategy thinking that you're going through, so I'd love to talk to you about that in a second. And then the second part of long-term planning is what operational, more day-to-day things a company and a management team need to do to address the new reality. And it really depends on the 2 last points, sort of where a company is in this matrix here in terms of risk and reward. And we split it based on how much runway you have, to the point you said capital is very important now to express strength. And then the other thing is how resilient your business model, your practice, your industry is to the underlying economic impacts of the pandemic. So if you're in the top right bucket, you're a winner because of this whole sort of change in reality, and you have a lot of runway. You should probably plan and operate differently than if you are at the bottom left. And when it comes to sort of the new operational model, we saw companies really addressing 5 topics, which is marketing, sales or go-to-market, and then HR and people management, customer success, and product. And on each one of them, the most sort of the dominating set of best practices is on marketing, which is completely shifted to virtual engagement with customers. Many things happen with sales, but given it's very difficult to have physical interactions, the best way to scale is just perfect inside sales, at least for now. We've heard across the board, and we had actually a very interesting webinar with a group of customer success professionals with the founder and CEO of Gainsight not too long ago. And it's very clear that for all companies, keeping their good client base and retaining them is the number one goal. There's very interesting developments in the HR field in terms of new employment models, and obviously dealing with the issues of not just working from home, but if you're a growing company and you need to hire new people, how do you get them integrated? How do you maintain and grow your culture in the new reality is super interesting. And then on the product side, we feel like product-led growth, leading the enabling the product to lead the company's growth through new features that are appropriate and adequate for what the world is going to look like, and reducing the friction so that customers can onboard themselves quicker and expand within the product are key winning strategies. So with that sort of backdrop, and I'll stop the share, maybe we'll dive into the sort of high level topic, which is strategy, if that's okay with you. So you've obviously been growing exceptionally fast, and I don't know this for a fact, but assuming facts still matter these days, I am going to assume at least that your growth has overall been fairly resilient to the crisis. So if that's the case, how do you think about strategy? How do you think about how do you try to leverage the near term and the long term changes that are happening in the world, some of them known, some of them unknown, to Marqeta's advantage?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky. We've done actually very well during this pandemic, and it's luck. We focused on a sector of tech called on-demand delivery. Companies like DoorDash, Instacart, Postmates, Uber Eats, Grubhub. We power all of them here in the U.S., Canada, and Asia, specifically Australia. And their volume is 3x what it was, even 6 months ago. And obviously, we make money from interchange. We take a cut of the interchange. We share that back to our customer. And obviously, that increase in volume, we've done very well in that. So we have thrived in this economy. We've seen a lot of pretty unique things happen. We were the first company in the world to instantly issue a card into Apple Pay. We did that work with Apple, Visa, and Square. We're now finding where that's up 200%. Companies are, even individuals, paying at the point of sale with their phone or tapping a card. We've seen within on-demand delivery alone a 10x increase in using phones at the point of sale. So there's a lot of decisions that were great decisions that turned out to be very lucky decisions in regards to where we're at today. So to underline how we're doing, we're actually doing really well in this economy, considering we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We certainly think about ourselves as essential infrastructure to these companies that are out there servicing, providing an essential service. So strategy is interesting. Strategy is in the world of modern card issuing. We have a massive TAM. We're obviously operating in that TAM. We're capturing a decent sized piece of it, even though it's incredibly large, $45 trillion today of carded volume globally. And at the same time, to me, I feel like an entrepreneur again. So the Marqeta was actually started in my house. I worked out of my house for many months, sort of honing what we're going to do in the very beginning and starting to build. It's interesting how coming back into this environment, working out of my fourth bedroom, being able to think about the company and what we want to do. It actually, the company feels very small, even though we're over 430 people today. So sitting down and thinking about what's going to be next over the next 3 to 5 years has actually been great. I went and did this, almost the same thing I did when I came up with the idea back in 2010. Was over a 3-day period. I wrote about 9 to 10 pages, just free flowing thought about what I wanted to accomplish here in the next 3 to 5 years. And we now have taken that to through an entire process. So we're going to be introducing that to the company in July. So strategy is something where it's not that strategy is constantly changing. The tactics are changing, the things that you want to create on a quarter by quarter basis, because as your business grows, there's many things that you're going to need to focus on, things you're going to decide to drop. It is okay. There's going to be things that you're going to go build, you're going to invest time and capital and resources into. And you might find that it's not getting traction. You actually want to cut it off and get rid of it. And that's okay too. Sometimes the strategy is not necessarily going to work. And sometimes it's serendipitous. Sometimes you create something that you didn't think was going to be big, and then you find there's an extraordinary product market fit that you can go out with. So this is a really good time to be working on strategy, because you are alone as an entrepreneur, as a founder or a co-founder, or as the CEO or the CTO or the chief product officer. Take the time to really clear your calendar out and think. Slack and email and texting is not work. It's in the service of work. Work is actually when you're alone and you're really thinking about what you want to go and accomplish. And then the things, like the texting and the slacking email is all in service to that.
It's great that you can find and devote time to, think strategically and, given everything that's going on. How do you factor into all this sort of thinking and then execution, competition and change in landscapes? Because there's a lot of uncertainty everywhere with respect to your own business. All your competitors or sort of the landscape around you is also facing uncertainty and changes, and it's very difficult to assess how they're going to react and how they're going to change. So how do you think about competition, and how would you recommend others to think about competition?
Well, I said this to the company: competition is good. Competition focuses you. It allows you to understand, what your competitors are doing. It helps you understand how what you're doing helps you achieve product market fit. In the land of competition, it allows you. It was interesting. We had a company enter our market about 2 years ago, and I got up in front of the company and said, "We have competitors. I don't know if anyone knew that. But let me throw them up on a slide." And it was interesting. People didn't realize that the companies that I threw up on the slide were our competitors. And it I think allowed the company to really think about, like, oh, okay, like, hey, there's a lot of people out there that compete with Marqeta in the card issuing space. We've carved out and found product market fit with this category that we invented called modern card issuing. And we're doing very well in that space. Now, you're going to have competitors that are going to try to enter your space, which is the second thing I told the company, which is you can't be as successful as Marqeta and not think that everybody is trying to copy your business model. That just simply happens. You can't, gain notoriety. You can't build extraordinary amounts of revenue. You can't have a great customer list without entrepreneurs, large companies, companies that haven't entered your space recognize that, hey, your company has achieved product market fit. I'm coming after you to somehow knock you off your pedestal, take revenue from you, steal your customers. It all happens. So for me, competition is really good. I think of myself as a warrior. This is my third company. I know what it's like to build a business. I know what it's like to compete. For me, it actually focuses me and energizes me. But it also allows you to focus on your customer, understanding what they want, sharing your product roadmap with them, understanding where, hey, this is where I'm shooting the puck. does this resonate with you? Is this what you're looking for? How do I make your business more successful? Especially today in the world of a pandemic, we're talking to all of our customers and understanding of just like, okay, where are your growth plans? Where are you going to get up and running? What do you need to be focused on? So competition is good. And also we find that in a pandemic where you have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of companies are going to go back to their core product. They're going to focus on shoring up everything from strategy and bugs to working closer with their customers. They're probably going to take less risk, which is natural in the scheme of things. So that is competition is a very important part of building a business. You have to sort of embrace it and make sure that you understand what your competitors are doing and have respect for them too.
Excellent. Before we dive into the second topic, which is leadership, if you don't mind, I'd love for you if you can share some of your personal journey as an entrepreneur. You mentioned it's your third company or business, and I personally think that one's past or journey has a profound impact on your leadership style and your leadership philosophy. So, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of that, I think it would be very helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I'm a Jewish kid from New Jersey. I grew up in a part of the world that, had the beach, and I had New York City, and I had, just an eclectic group of people. I think, obviously people from New Jersey have a reputation, and I see that in a lot of different folks that, I grew up with, or like yourself, that are from there. So, my journey is I've always had businesses. Since I was a little kid, I was always kind of hustling people for money, whether it was, picking their weeds, cutting their grass, shoveling their snow. I always liked making my own money. I found a lot of value and excitement in seeing that my own work, put money in my pocket. There's something really I liked about that. I remember my neighbor in Homedale, New Jersey, Ivan Pinhas, Ivan and I talked about as little 5-year-old kids, starting a landscaping company. Actually, he has a landscaping. He has a huge landscaping company in New Jersey, which is pretty interesting. Like that sort of dream of being an entrepreneur doesn't really go away. His actually father was an entrepreneur, and I come from a line of entrepreneurs. The businesses just got bigger as I got older. I had a tie-dye business in college. I had actually the same tie-dye business in high school. Started my first company in 1997 called Vertical Think. It was sort of an early kind of dating service, or like an e-lance, where you had these sort of web development projects that were fairly small, and you had second-tier web developers that needed to find business. So we sort of match-made them. That wasn't terribly successful. I learned an incredible amount. Then I co-founded in 2004 a company named Property Bridge, allowed you to pay rent electronically. A very good friend of mine, Ryan Gilbert, introduced me to the payments world through our work with Property Bridge together. We ended up selling that to MoneyGram International. I was on the executive team at MoneyGram for 2 years. And then during the Property Bridge time and the MoneyGram time, I fell in love with payments. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which was build another payments company. I just didn't know what that was until I was literally eating sushi with a friend in San Francisco. He said, you're a payment nerd. Try to put a bunch of Groupons onto a card. And that led me on the journey to where I am at today. So I love being an entrepreneur. It drives me, it gets me up every morning. It allows me to do the things, which is work with great people every day, work with great customers, solve problems. It's been very nice. I've been very lucky.
Great. So Marqeta was founded in 2010. I think it's fair to say that the significant acceleration in value creation, which happened along the way, but it really accelerated, I think, around 2017, or maybe I'm wrong a little bit, but
Little earlier than that.
yeah. But so which makes your story even more incredible. So what message do you have to those entrepreneurs that are, working hard to make their dream a reality, but still haven't it didn't strike gold yet as they're digging, but they should keep on going at it, or maybe not.
Yeah, or maybe not. You have to find product market fit. Product market fit is not binary. It's actually a feeling. When you're working towards, and keep in mind, we did not have product market fit in the beginning. We built an issuing processing system from scratch. The first product was the Marqeta card, which which basically solved the Groupon issue. We did that. So the ability to put a million different separate stores of value on a single card. When that card is swiped, we found that every terminal in the world, whether online or offline, generates a very unique message called an ISO 8583 message that allows you to travel around the world with your Visa or MasterCard card in your hand. And it works everywhere because every terminal is generating the same ISO message. And then the issuer processor is getting that message and finds a lot of unique information in it, which allows you to essentially unlock, in our case, unlock stored value at a very specific store. So we introduced this card to the market, started in Portland, Oregon. We then introduced it to Oakland and San Francisco. The ability to pay in advance for things like pay in advance for your groceries, $500, get a 7% return on your money. It wasn't terribly successful. Also, I found for myself personally, I didn't like a consumer business. I like very complex infrastructure. I like being behind the scenes. I like powering other businesses as like an Intel inside. I find a lot more joy in that than having to talk to consumers all the time about, hey, you're guaranteed a 7% return on your money. You're never going to get that anywhere. So part of the journey, Facebook called and said, hey, we want to create the Facebook card, which is your birthday. 100 friends want to send you 100 different gift cards at 100 different merchants. We want them to all live on one card. And it turns out that you're the only company in the world that has this technology. And they were right. They had talked to everybody. They recommended they talk to us. We were shocked because we were 17 people at the time. But then we began working with Facebook. This is 2012. Product came out in 2013. It was moderately successful. Facebook wanted to capture about 1% of the market within a year. That didn't happen. They shut it down. But we found product market fit. We found a product that solved a problem where a company like Facebook went to these customers, went to all of these issuer processors, and they pointed to us. So, and in 2014 opened up the API, and in 2015 really found product market fit to the point where we got crushed with the amount of interest coming in from companies wanting to work with us, where we really had to operationally slow down, which was really understand a very pretty well-documented API doesn't solve all the problems. So we had to learn to operationalize. And then 2016 really took off like a rocket to where we are today.
Excellent. Maybe one more question is sort of leadership management. You recently invited a couple of very senior industry veterans as board members to Marqeta's journey, which is a great move. And both of them were their own sort of distinct backgrounds. Sounds like a great addition to the team. It is a big decision to bring in those people and invite them to your boardroom. What drove you to that decision, and when do you think is sort of the right time to get an outside view of experts involved at sort of the formal board level?
For years, I wanted to bring in outside board members. My board members were, all the time saying, "Hey, we need to get some independent folks in here." I have a very small board. I like it that way. It wasn't that I didn't want to bring in independent board members. It was something that takes time and focus. And at the time, I was being asked to bring in independent board members. It just wasn't sort of the most important thing to me at the time. I think as we've grown, I've got to meet, a lot of interesting, well-accomplished people along the way. And so Judd Linville, Judd is very accomplished. He's a payment nerd like me. He was the CEO of American Express Consumer Cards. He was the CEO of Citi Consumer Cards. He has an extraordinary amount of experience. I was actually introduced to him through a mutual friend. I was in Manhattan for traveling. He and I got together for breakfast and really hit it off. So I got to know Judd over many months, and I asked him if he wanted to join the board, and obviously he did. I had been thinking about trying to find an audit chair for some time. Helen sits on the board of Eventbrite. I know Kevin and Julia Hartz well. I thought, hey, they're great entrepreneurs, great people. They must have really seen something in Helen. Got to know Helen. Actually, I've never met Helen in person. I think, like many of us today, a lot of the relationships we have are over, Zoom and Google Hangout and others. But really found somebody who's not only wicked smart, but she also understands, the sort of audit chair. She's the CFO of Google X. She spent many, many years at Google growing up through the ranks. I like that. I like the warrior mentality of, really fighting to get to the top of your game. And actually talked to a number of CFOs, had a number of options, and really enjoyed my conversations with Helen. And now she has joined our board as audit chair.
Great. On the sort of, if you remember the slide that I shared on sort of the operational functions that really need to be adjusted, tweaked, or whatever you want to call them. What are some of the best practices that you implemented at Marqeta in the past few months on, pick what makes sense, on customer success, on the people management side, on the go-to-market side? Some good example that you feel have really worked well for you guys.
I would say a couple things. I think customer success is a big part of that. Talking to customers on a regular basis, and not just the customer success people. Me and other executives, product people, engineers, really connecting with people, because companies are built with people. People build technology. And yes, the technology in many ways does speak for itself based on its performance, but having relationships is really important. Not just relationships with your customers, but relationships with each other in the company, making sure that you really understand what the customer journey looks like through your business, from product ideation to long-term support of that product as it's built and shipped. And then how that interacts with the team. So operationally, it's obviously different for all companies. For us, it's really about strategy. The culture has changed for many of us pretty significantly. I mean, keep in mind, a lot of companies gone from being in the office, finding those sort of serendipitous moments of getting a cup of coffee in the kitchen. You run into somebody. And you learn about them and their story. A lot of that stuff is just not happening now. So it's a good opportunity to sort of reconnect on the strategy, talk to people about the things that need to happen. We have, happy hours and contests and all sorts of things to begin engaging with the business. I think that's really important. We're also seeing in areas where, for me personally, Black Lives Matter. This is something that I didn't, and I regret didn't focus on as a CEO and entrepreneur. That you have this company of people that are working for you that have all different backgrounds, and some of those backgrounds have been very difficult, especially for Black people in the United States. So it's also about caring about the people for you and recognizing the struggles for them. And their background, the things that they need to accomplish in your lives. So as a company, we've also reconnected more with people in the company that we feel like we need to support more. So As soon as the pandemic went down, we spun up Oaklanders supporting Oaklanders in about 5 days. We've raised an extraordinary amount of money to feed Oaklanders through our work with Tanya Holland at Brown Sugar Kitchen. And then on top of that, we've donated $100,000 to nonprofits that support the Black community, not only here in Oakland, but across the US. And then we've raised to date internally through Marqeta's almost $40,000 to donate to the Advancement Project, which is another nonprofit supporting Black Americans. So there's a lot of stuff I think that we focus on that are really important, and I would not lose sight of that. It's not just about building a great, successful business. It's also about the people and connecting with them internally, not only the people at Marqeta or your business, but the people within your community.
Very, very inspiring. For the last 5 minutes or a couple minutes that we have, and I've been getting chat questions about this, and love to touch on a few things that are more industry related or fintech payments. Sounds like our audience are interested in it. So a few people asked me to ask if you have a view on the impact that the sort of Wirecard incident or fiasco may or may not have on the fintech landscape, on payments more specifically. What might be the fallout?
I don't think it's going to affect payments. Marcus Braun was a crook, and who else was involved in that? They should be prosecuted. You can't build a business and lie, especially in the public markets. The good news is their accounting firm, Ernst & Young, caught it. They saw there were, some significant issues going on, and now we're seeing a massive fallout. Obviously they're gone insolvent. They're very much a melting ice cube right now. And this happens. There are companies that are basically run by people who have a different MO about how to run their business. So I think the fallout is potentially more regulation, especially understanding how companies are being run, and especially in the world of Wirecard, making sure they, the $2 billion they claim they have is actually there, calling the bank and making sure that the money is there. But I don't think it affects fintech or payments at all. I definitely think it affects companies who are public and maybe companies that are private, to make sure that they're being honest about their books and the cash they have on hand.
Okay, great. And maybe one last question, if you have the time. So you sort of have a little bit of a preview of many things that go on in many industries, giving you power, different verticals. So you talked a little bit of a sort of on-demand delivery and the explosion that's happening there. Some industries are benefiting from the changes in consumer behavior, some less. What can you share, at least that you foresee as maybe the medium or longer term effects on different vertical or different industries that you have visibility to as a result of all this, and recognizing that it's a little bit hard to say because we're still in the middle of all this?
Yeah, we power a number of great companies. In the buy now, pay later, we power Afterpay, Affirm, Klarna. On-demand delivery, we power everybody. We power digital banks like the Cash App at Square. So we have a pretty unique view in both commercial use cases and consumer use cases. We also happen to power a lot of e-commerce as well. So what we're finding is a lot of the paradigm around how consumers are shopping is very different. We're going to see, obviously, and I've talked about this, the digital first technology. So paying with your phone or tapping cards or paying online, we thought was going to hit the real sort of rocket ship 3 to 4 years from now. That's happening now. So we're seeing where very much digital first technologies become crucial. Cash is dirty. It's proven to carry viruses on it. I mean, who knew? So we're going to probably see ATM transactions go down fairly significantly, and people really move towards electronic transactions. We've also seen where companies are different. I think we're going to see exoduses from large cities to more rural areas. So, creating better infrastructure for rural areas, just like simply broadband and services so that you can run, your business out of your home is now going to become commonplace. We're finding it not only here at Marqeta, which, we've told Marquetans that, work anywhere you want. We're finding that we can actually work not in an office and ship high quality, be connected, work hard, all of that in this new model. So there's a lot changing with regards to not only how new businesses will be built, but how these businesses are going to shape the economy, support the economy, and support people around the world. It's part of the reason why I spent 3 days working on strategy, and now 3 months with the entire company on sort of what's next, because we're seeing this obviously a true paradigm shift and a real evolution in how payments are going to work for the future.
Fascinating. Well, I do want to respect your time and everybody sort of on the phone's time and stick to our 45 minutes. This has been, at least for me, a fascinating discussion. I always love, chatting with you and getting your perspective. And I very much look forward to keeping on following your success and seeing what's next for you and your team.
All right. Thanks, Rafi. I really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much.